thing happening in Africa, happening in Nigeria, is not happening just because some people didn't go to Harvard or some people went. What's happening here is that it's an environment that is void of hope. So when that happened through the next generation, through the next generation, through the next generation, by the time you came up, all you had to look at in your village was some buildings. No Homer. There's nothing you remember your grandfather for. He did not invent anything that you know of. And his grandfather before him, he was a great warrior. They used to fight. They won their battles. They were great conquerors. No record of any discoveries. No mark of what they made. Do you understand where I'm going to with this? Now, because of these pictures, the next generation doesn't have what to believe in. It is that absence of hope that slows down a region from development, much more than anything. In fact, let me tell you the truth of the matter. I'll say something, it may sound how it should sound, but it will give you some thoughts. Corruption has not been Nigerians' problem. It has not. Africa's major problem is not corruption. It's not. Corruption is worldwide. It's a global issue. The version of corruption that happens here is corruption in the midst of hopelessness. That is, it is unchallenged because there is no hope. Who wants to challenge it? Even the people that are climbing there to challenge, you don't even believe them. You never believe them. You may say, the president has disappointed us. Deep down in your heart, you did not believe he would deal with corruption. When he was entering there, you were watching him laughing. You knew he would make a few arrests, but corruption, where will he start from? That thing that makes people not significantly look at life that can be is the impoverishment of the African mind. And that thing cannot be solved by presidential decisions, cannot be solved by governments in the sense of the word. It can be solved by what people like Sensei is doing, what people like you and I will eventually do, which is leadership across platforms, especially leadership that is not stringed to positions. Leaderships that can rise based on the authority of morality or basically authenticity. That means people just look at you and see that you are real, see that you are unsponsored, see that there is no other agenda but the hope to see people rise. And it's those kind of leaderships budding all over Africa that will change the mindset. If you would only see how big this thing is, just beyond whether people can stand and sponsor and the kind of thing that Victor Okoro does and the kind of thing that you do or all our speakers do, and especially those who are listening, if you only see how large this is, when this concept is brought and integrated into the mix, in a matter of years, we'll be able to change, if not for all of Africa, at least in Nigeria, the most important thing that needs to change, mindset. And that mindset can be exchanged with the value of hope, that a people can rise, a people can be. Because before we even talk about leadership, remember that mutual thing, that is, do the people even want to be led? As we are approaching 2019, in your mind, and most analysts, especially concerning political leadership, let me drop this on here. As we are approaching 2019, the mindset of people is that this suffering that they have made us suffer. 2019, we will all carry our cards and surprise them. You'll be surprised at that election in 2019. Because suffering produces let me not put your conference in trouble. Suffering produces two reactions. One reaction is revolt. We can bank on that, 50-50. The other reaction is relapse. We are so tired. Go and vote. You have not seen that reaction. That reaction is that our minds, we cannot even put it to. So those analysts that are thinking that they are going to see a showdown in 2019 usually do not calculate that impoverishment does not only produce revolution, it also produces this retirement. This is over. We hope your generation will do the battle for us. God bless you. Let us die in peace. It's also so that mindset that we're always aware as we are putting these things in, right? That we are in a context that has this. And as we close, we will close up on some key things to make sure that our generations or the people around us always escape and walk in that audacity of hope. Okay, so one, the rest of them will be very quick because you already are schooled in some form or the other concerning. I should assume that. But basically, let's go for the spectrum of leadership. Let's look at three major models of leadership now. And also, okay, let's just start from there. So the spectrum of leadership. Now, this very wide subject I've compacted into three major things, right? And then some things are derived from there. So three models of leadership. The first one is laissez-faire, or what they call laissez-faire. It's laissez-faire. You have that French thing. It's a French word, right? What does that French word mean, actually, if you did French? What does it mean? Huh? Natural. Yes, I will explain why that leadership is very important, laissez-faire. Then the second is transactional leadership. Transactional leadership. And the third, which is what we'll just talk about, is transformational leadership. And so with the heavy points on transformational leadership, but allow me just do a basic definition of all three, okay? Okay, so laissez-faire, a Frenchman speak that in well. Laissez-faire. And I don't like that word. It actually sounds like a lazy affair, And actually, it's the one that's how I remember it, lazy affair. Laissez-faire leadership is, you can describe this as consensus leadership, right? Consensus leadership. Before I describe these three, let's do this. Let me have your attention, then you can write down. Now, what I'm planning to do with this, I'm planning to coast real quick right across these three, okay? In this session, I'm just making three definitions, and then I'm going to rest with the third. So I'm actually anchoring on transformational leadership. I'm seeing transformational leadership as the hope of what we are doing, as the hope of change, as the hope of the culture changes you're going to make across the spectrum, right? But we are defining the other two on our way to the third, right? Okay, so when we define, you already come up, as I'm speaking, with many examples of this kind of leadership, all right? So we can now go together. So the consensus leadership, laissez-faire, it's also known as delegative leadership. It's a type of leadership where leaders are hands-off and allow group members to make the decision. Leaders are hands-off. Leaders don't disturb. They allow group members. Remember what I call it. One way to remember is consensus leadership. Consensus leadership. What's the House of Assembly saying? So consensus leadership. So researchers have found that this is generally the leadership style that leads to the lowest productivity among groups. Lowest. It is definitely a leadership style. Now, I'm going to say something when we come to leadership styles, so basically following the models. Once it's leadership, you should think much more like a continuum. You shouldn't think of this style is better than this style, is better than this style. A better way to look at it is an integrated approach. Remember what we said from the beginning, which means there is a time to use this and there's a time to use that. But basically, when we categorize it, what we are saying is that we would prefer that people lean more towards this and use less of that. So what I'm saying is when you study across the board, you study how leadership actually acts, there will be a time or the other as a leader when you hands off and let people run the show and watch what they make out of it. And every good leader will have a time or the other when they will allow consensus thrive. But to make that the color of all leadership will be dangerous for everybody. You know why it is difficult not to give examples in Nigeria? Is that many presidents, many elected presidents, actually have the feeling that when they go into power, when they are elected, that somehow, by the deliberations of the House, House of Assembly is making laws, as everybody is coming together, the wheel of government will somehow be turning in the right direction. Wheel of government. Is there anything like wheel of government, WHEEL, that things will somehow be moving? They have not studied thermodynamics. They don't know the laws that govern the universe. One of those laws says that anything that is left to itself without an active force on it will come to ruin. In fact, about 2 of those laws support the fact that if this thing is going nowhere, it will spoil. There is no such thing as going nowhere. This is what aviation industry understands. A parked plane is more difficult to maintain than a moving plane. A plane parked, that is, the plane is not moving. Even car, right? Yes. Once they are not, once this thing, it becomes entirely, no. What they are saying is that there is no such thing as packed in nature. No such thing as this thing is not in motion. No, it's not in obvious motion. It's in ruin. It's that it is like this means it's on its way somewhere else. Because there's that law of motion. It must be in constant flux. You follow what I'm saying? So many times people come into power, they come in with the idea, especially in elected leadership, with the idea that when they sit down, somehow the wheels will somehow move in one particular direction or the other. That is why Africa, specifically Nigeria, has seen very few leaders, but has had many presidents. Very few leaders, many presidents. Because it is the operation of leadership that causes people to see the future they want to head to and make government, make it the will of government, make it where government starts turning to. So that you see nations that rise always have the point where they said, no, this is not where we desire to be. In the next 20 years, this is where we should be. It is that missing element we've had from, this is not just a Nigerian problem. Look at Africa as a whole. And what you see is more people who enjoy being in power, right? Being at the head, and always hiding behind the wheel of government somehow, as if by some movement we are making progress. But House of Assembly, different people can be making many bills, but the nation might not still have a particular direction it should be taking. Somewhere that it is national destination, is its strategy as a country. And once it hasn't marked X as a spot and start moving in that direction, it will only be making laws based on situations. Herdsman strike, law against herdsmen. After that one, serpent strike, law against serpents. After just continuous like that, cattle law, serpent law, if it emerges, you solve it. But all that is different if you have where you're going as a whole. What? Cattle and serpents. See how you do? Let me proceed now. So what I'm saying is that kind of leadership doesn't help. Now, so we don't overstretch that point, let's just make this clear. Nobody goes forward with this laissez-faire, and the recorded loss it produces is too much. Leadership is intentional, right? And this thing about waiting for people to all come together before we move somewhere is as dangerous as moving something in the wrong direction, right? Okay, so the next one is transactional leadership, and you can look at it as leadership by negotiation. Transactional leadership, leadership by negotiation. So I read this out to you. Transactional leadership is a style of leadership that focuses on supervision, organization, and performance. Okay? It's a style of leadership that focuses on supervision, organization, and performance. Transactional leadership is a style of leadership where leaders promote compliance by followers using rewards and punishments. Let me take it again. Should I take it again? So, okay, transactional leadership. This style of leadership focuses on supervision, organization, and performance. This style is a style of leadership where leaders promote compliance among their followers using rewards and punishments. So let me stop right there, explain it a bit, and then just kind of move forward. One more highlight. Remember what we said about when you're looking at the whole thing, you look at them in an integrated way. What that means is that no matter what leadership style or leadership model you are using, there are some merits in it. Okay? So remember what we just concluded. We just talked about the one before this, laissez-faire. It has merits. It's just that its merits are drowned by its is offset by the problems it creates. Okay? Okay? What merit would that be? It's always pays to listen to your team. It always pays to allow people to develop things. You see it in a better way in transformational leadership that kind of carries the best of all. Right? So, but in transactional leadership, you're looking at a case. This is the most popular kind of leadership because this leadership is based on transaction. In fact, almost all positional leaderships are transactional leadership. There's nothing wrong in the word transaction in itself, but it's good that you understand the place that this kind of leadership takes. What I mean is this. If you work somewhere and you have a boss, right? You work somewhere, you probably have a boss. The relationship is transactional. The reason you enter that company is not for the good of mankind. Or you believe it's for the good of mankind. Okay, let's remove the salary and let's see how long you stay for mankind's good. Of course, there are people who have more. I'm not saying this to slight those who may have a stronger outlook towards the future. We'll get to that. But usually, the reason is you enjoy the job, you have many things, but also, guy, where's the pay? So immediately the person comes and says, I'll pay you this. That person is your leader by default. Now, this sets some problems. Is that whatever that person knows or does not know is set ahead of you. There's no such thing as you somehow being the leader because you went to Harvard. No, your Harvard has been employed by this guy whose view of life includes sometimes your enemy can be looking for you. So this thing you are talking, you don't know Nigeria well. You say we should advertise, we should go out there. No, going out there, that's when the enemy will find you. Let us operate. So what they're saying is that you're automatically there. It's not merit that chooses. It's not respect that chooses. It's not many other leadership systems. It's not even influence. You may even despise totally the way this person operates, but it's your boss. Don't lift up your hand, but just allow me continue by some friendly nods if you know what I mean. That's why people can be somewhere as they just enter work, they start the clock. What they are waiting for is 4:30 or 4 o'clock. And they are ready to stomach any process that goes on in between for the joy set before them. And this joy set before them is not what is happening at work. This joy set before them is 4 o'clock. Because once 4 o'clock reaches, the joy has begun. That is their happiest part of the day when work is over. Inside there, they have somebody who tells them what to do, tells them how to do it, and they stomach it. You can say that leadership is going on, but the question is under what platform? It is totally transactional. And most of the time, why you move left or right is because of this carrot and stick process, which is if you do well, you have a carrot. And if you don't do well, you have a stick. It's important that you see something about this system of leadership. Most of us, as at the time I'm speaking, have experienced this leadership. This leadership was the kind of leadership that was employed at us. I hope we are all aware that when you are in class, the teacher is the leader. There's a leadership situation in a classroom. Remember primary school? That was a leadership situation. Just like families, just like elders, just like all those things are leadership situations. So one of the most prevalent, in fact, the most prevalent leadership situation for us was this transactional leadership, especially in class. Remember, memory lane, go back to class. Are you seated? Primary 2C, primary 3C. Well, it was very clear how to go forward. There is a teacher. He's a good boy. Clap for him. And all that happens in that class is just the relationship between that teacher, the avoidance of that cane, and the desire for, she's a good girl. Clap for her. So, people, we don't really understand things. Did you understand the times table? Do you really think you understood the times table? No. We crammed it. No. Few people understand what 2 times 10 means. That it's 2 into 10 places. That's complex. It's 2 times 10. It's 20. It's 20 because if it's not 20, when it should be 20, I remember primary school. My teacher moving with the cane, dragging as he's moving through the class while we are reacting. 4 times 1, 4, 4 times 10, 4 times 3. And so you really, sometimes you don't even know what 11 times. You don't look at the other person like 11 times, 11. It depends on the school you went to. I went to, my school was a bureaucracy. So, you call that thing sharp. You look at the other person's mouth. You're not learning. You're avoiding that cane. And once they ring that bell, especially if you went to all those schools that don't have louvers, you see people jump out the window. It's like breakthrough. The speed at which they escape learning is the same speed you are using to escape work. So my point about transactional leadership is that no matter what merit it puts on the table, very awesome for making sure people are on target, because you see that times table, as much as I like to condemn what it made out of you, it was what ensured you passed mathematics all the time. And as long as you 2 times 10, you just put 20 there and everything. But should I also tell you what it did? It made you avoid further maths. Because once maths becomes further maths, it's asking you to think, not memorize. I take that ring to be we're making progress. Or is that ring a time bell? What does that mean? I have like 15 minutes. 15, Okay, yeah. We'll make progress. Somewhere, anywhere we stop, we have made some kind of progress. So that kind of leadership is the reason why you have not gone to your alma mater in a long while. You remember? Have you gone back to those teachers to tell them thank you for really leading you? You have avoided them. Some are dead now. And anyone that follows that model usually ends up in that destination. It brings short-term results and it takes away the long-term goal. It's not bad, but it all depends on where you are going. So leaders and leaders that follows that way, it doesn't always work. This kind of discussion, knowing that we have like 15 minutes more to bracket this, the robust discussions that sometimes have to do with like the nation and how this applies. Okay, you have some sessions. How this applies to it, I will save it for Senate session, because when you look at the system of politics and you look at what happens, you see this carrot and stick. You see it's wrapped in the whole system of our leadership, our electoral processes, and everything that we do. And the problem with transactional leadership is that it forces narrow thinking. In fact, it actually breaks the creativity that it takes for sometimes for new options to come through. Because all of us are really thinking through one person's mind. That's why institutional people can go forward. You can see somebody working in something like NMPC. You see the person going forward, riding through the ranks, getting to be number 1 very easily. Or now they retire, you start a company. Impossible. Cannot operate. You will take the money, start the company will fold up. What is happening here is that it's easier to ride through the ranks of transactional leadership, because really, if you understand all their bosses and their idiosyncrasies, you will know how to line up with them and make them happy. That equals to promotion. And if you are in civil service and you have not understood that, you will stay in one place very long, because the way to go is find out what he likes and toe that line. As long as he's correct, you are correct too. But sustainable change, when you remove that man from that context, that woman from that context, big millions into their hand and tell them start life, you will see them dwindle. Why? Because most of the kinds of the kind of tool sets you need for negotiating in life, interpreting life and everything has nothing to do with that closed world system. You are thinking and progressing through another person's mindset. And maybe many times have not even shown some original thought of your own. And in this circle, all it's asking is, what do you think? This affects people. In case you are also in ministry, have you not noticed some people are fabulous tools? They are in a ministry, maybe like a Christian ministry or something, an organization or like that, and they're number 2 pastor. Just giving an example. This Africa, we have some of those examples. You see them, then they break out or maybe leave to go and start their own, and you see they cannot move forward. What is happening? This man was in charge of like hundreds, thousands of people here, but now he has come, he's only hundreds. What's happening is that in a system that is transactional, all he had to do was follow orders to get to where he got to. But now he has come to an open system that has no such rule and is asking for creative, original thoughts. But he has not been exercised. They have not been exercised in that world of discourse. This is very important too. Victor Okoro knows that. That is why those people who always read Harvard textbook, Harvard textbook, Harvard textbook, Harvard textbook, you would think that you have brought business solutions by them. But many times it's close thinking, because you're always looking at solutions through other people's eyes. Time for interpretation. Put them as minister or something. They don't know what to do in this context. Because originally, they don't know how to open up to original thoughts. And the longer people don't master that, the longer they stay within that closed wall of the book says, and they forget that the ground too has something to say. Let me use the last 5 minutes I perceive to just wrap up something, okay? Let it sound like. So the last one is transformational leadership, and let's give the definition. Transformational leadership, this is leadership by inspiration, okay? And transformational leadership is a process that changes and transforms people. It is concerned with emotions, values, ethics, standards, and long-term goals. It includes assessing followers' motives, satisfying their needs, and treating them as human beings. Let me say it again. Transformational leadership is a process that leadership process that changes and transforms people. It is concerned with their emotions, that's the people's emotions, their values, their ethics, their standards, and their long-term goals. And it includes assessing the followers, their motives, satisfying their needs, and treating them as human beings. Now, if you've copied that, let me see how far my materials have gone. Okay, this is good. So I'll just put a full stop. I want to draw something on that. You see, this transformational leadership, what we have here, is an opportunity. This transformational leadership was basically, after studying leadership, understand that leadership as a science is basically new. It's maybe just about 200 years old, maybe 180 or something. What they mean by that is that there have been leaders through time, but studying leadership as in what makes a leader, how do leaders work, what's really happening, it's relatively a new science. It's emerging. Now, but here's what, so this transformational leadership, right, is what they have seen, is what experts are saying and saying that, no, this kind of leadership is more suited. The reason is, it's the kind of leadership that does not necessarily hinge on position and has maximum use of influence. Once a leader is transformational, what they mean is that it doesn't matter which position you put in, he's the one people follow. She's the one people follow. I know how that sounds, but it's a reality. This particular kind of leadership is the leadership to comfort. In fact, the leadership aspect to understand. And that was what I was saying when they say remapping the value system of Africa will need transformational leaders. Because elected leaders have a long way to go based on the value system that already exists. At best, elected leaders will become very, very honest transactional leaders. That's why they say, if you vote me, I will give you roads. The governor was on air recently, and he had some interesting remarks. Very interesting interview, I think on Channel. So I was watching him, and I just love the way he held his own with the journalist. That guy is just a punch, So just watching the interview, and as he's talking, they're listening. One thing he ensured was that he controlled the narrative of that discussion. Very important, leaders, you appear on that thing. Remember, it's what you said, not what you plan to say. That everybody remembers. Just remember. Remember. That's why when they give you question, any journalist here, they know when they give you question, that question does not mean you have to answer it. That question is what they want you to say. Just say what you want to say to the question, because it does not have to match. So this one is pro bono. Would you speak more on the distance and the case? Do you see a possible clash between the two of them? Very important thing you say about possible clashes, which brings me to why it's important for us to avoid cases that produce possible clashes. Because if they had fixed this matter, we wouldn't be discussing this possible clash in the first place. You have escaped. Because that kind of yes or no situation is the one they will use for headline. but by your tactful answer of the thing, so that one is pro bono. So, but while he was sitting down and speaking, he could not help but explain the dynamic